Welcome back. This, of course, is the news super review on K24 this morning, looking at the big stories of the day. Before we took the break, talking about the Kibra by-election, what it means in terms of new political alliances, the BBI being here. Of course, the train has left the station. But also, something that had been raised, the silence of the people who should have spoken when, violence took place, that we haven't heard the DCI on this particular issue, the CS investigating this as well. What does that mean as we move forward? Because you had people chest thumping at a Thanksgiving rally and talking about that, making fun of what happened, with Jeanette wearing the hat. What does that mean in terms of future elections? Well,
first forget about the DCI and every other party. And let's focus on the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, whose role, basically its constitution was based on the violence around elections. And so any political incitive statements are supposed to basically be investigated by the NCIC. And one time I had a conversation with one of the NCIC officials, and both of them were gentleman and lady, both of them told me that one of the biggest hindrances to their work is that cohesion bit of their mandate, in the sense that politicians like this will go make a lot of noise in Kibra, cause a lot of chaos, but they are mandated to ensure there is cohesion even amongst the politicians themselves. And that is what hinders the meeting of justice on these particular individuals. And just a bit on BBI. I see a lot of people running to the BBI, and for me, in my view, most politicians are running towards BBI as a way of sanitizing themselves. Because some of these politicians who are going to purportedly stand on platforms supporting BBI are politicians accused of some of the things that BBI will be trying to resolve. Amongst them, corruption. Many of them have corruption scandals that have never been unveiled, or rather still in court, cases that are yet to come out, scandals that are yet to come out. Okay. So my prayer and hope is that even as BBI comes out, people shall not have sanitized themselves by the mere virtue of, I am supporting BBI. And so if I'm involved in corruption, please spare me, because what, I'm standing for BBI. So let us not forget that, let us not sanitize people, cleanse people, wash their sins away simply because they support BBI. And as for violence, I think now we need to have an honest conversation, because even back then, back at Kibra, I was there on the ground when the elections were taking place. And some of the people I see accusing ODM of violence, which is wrong. We saw that on media. We saw it was wrong of ODM leaders to instigate violence. But then again, also Jubilee leaders were there, and I saw it happening with Mariga's team coming in with an entourage of border guys, carrying stones. So violence was displayed on both parts. Can we have a sober conversation with our leadership regarding... I was there at Ayani Primary.
Before we get to that, we actually have Senator Kangata on the line, and we'll have to go to that first and then come back to this issue later. Of course, you have Senator Kangata on the line, talking about the fact that Mount Kenya feels heat of Uhuru Ruto Cold War. Of course, this coming after the fact that the president and his deputy should have visited Amuranga ACK Church in a fundraiser, but there was a no-show in terms of either of them showing up. Senator Kangata, good morning.
Fine, I'm okay.
How are you so far?
I'm okay. I'm very good.
Just a quick recap as to what might have happened and the insights you might have in regard to that particular story. You were there at that particular fundraiser. Might you have any insights as to why the president and the deputy didn't show, even after all protocol had been followed, and clearly the entire county government and everybody was expecting the deputy and his president to be there on that day?
Let me say we made the invitation to the president way early in February this year. I went there with the bishop to the State House. We had gone there to pick a bus that had been donated by the president during my wedding. When we were there, we talked with the president. He agreed to come yesterday to the fundraiser, and therefore we commenced the preparation. But let me concede that I had not alerted the deputy president, so there is every likelihood the deputy president proceeded to make arrangements for another event, having no knowledge that the president will be going to Moranga the same day. And therefore, those were two parallel events, which for me, you can't blame either for scheduling them for one day. Right. Now, once we proceeded to do the arrangement, we went yesterday, we waited for the president. It appears new things emerged. Remember, the president is hosting a huge conference. Several heads of state are coming in. And therefore, because of those urgent meetings of hosting various heads of state, the president could not join us. So for me, I disagree with the notion that is being bandied around that president deliberately refused to come. Remember, he sent a high-powered delegation to that event which I was hosting that included CS Matiang'i, CS Masharia, CS Mucheru. He gave a generous donation. For me, the event went well. We pushed the agenda for Murang'a people. We expressed our love for the president. And therefore, I take it that the president did not come, not because of political reasons, just because of the heavy schedule that emerged.
Okay, but Senator, okay, I think we've lost the Senate at that particular point in time. Very many questions raised because even as we had that, we had the full presidential protocol there as well, and everyone was expecting him up until the moment when they were informed that he would ensure, and he sent, of course, as he says, the high-powered government delegation right there. But I hope we'll get Senator back to clarify some issues on that particular story as we talk about it. But Arnold, you had a rejoinder you wanted to give in terms of what happened in Kibra.
I just wanted to say quickly that if the media did not capture that, Ruth, whom I had on set somewhere else discussing the elections, cannot have captured that there was also violence from the other side. The people who are receiving from the very beginning. Okay, thank you.
We've gotten the Senator back. Senator Kangata?
Yeah, maybe I can finish. I was saying that...
Okay, what I wanted to ask also, Senator, I also wanted to bring up the issue in terms of some people saying that the reason why this last-minute cancellation happened was the fact that on the ground, popularity is waning, and of course the key issue being the BBI, and it's brought divisions in central Kenya, not only in Murang'a, but Nyeri and Kiambu, and because of this insights into this particular issue, the president decided probably to sit this one out instead of going there when the ground really wasn't right and ripe for his presence. What do you have to say with regard to that?
The president is very popular in Murang'a County. He has done a lot of projects in our county. There are several roads that have been paved after I pushed the president to ensure they have been paved. I don't want to enumerate them because there are just too many. We know of several water projects that are ongoing currently. We know of his electrification projects in our county. Of course, we know there are some outstanding projects like what, let's say, for instance, coffee issues, tea issues. And therefore, I agree there is work in progress. But for a president who has tarmacked a lot of roads in Murang'a County, more than the tarmacs that were tarmacked by the previous three presidents combined, why should he be unpopular?
But Senator, what I was asking,
he remains a popular president
Senator
in our
Kangata,
county and the larger Mount Kenya region.
Senator Kangata, what I was actually addressing was not the development agenda, but this BBI that seems to have cut not only the ruling party, but also various constituencies in half in terms of whether they support this particular BBI move or not. What's your sentiment in terms of Murang'a and the BBI, and from that particular point, the perception they have of the president and that particular move?
Of course, when the president does good things economically, that will translate to political goodwill, and therefore he'll be able to push his agenda. For me, I have no doubt about it that once the president continues his good work economically, people will follow his political agenda, and therefore we wait for the BBA to be released. If it has good proposals, which the president embraces, once he comes to our region, I don't see the reason why people will not support his position.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much for that, Senator Kangata. Thanks for clearing up the air on that particular issue. And thanks for making time for being on the line this morning on K24 this morning. Have a good day. So there you have it from the Senator of Murang'a, BBI not being an issue in terms of what might have brought that particular division right there.
Yes.
But Arnold, we are with you on this particular story in terms of the by-election. Probably finish on that and then move on.
I'm actually just, I needed to, we didn't have an opportunity to ask him, but in his comments he made yesterday, he said that he's so happy to have seen Matiang'i sent by the president. Yes.
And that meant the president is there in spirit.
He said that when he sees Matiang'i, he sees the president. He said that the people of Murang'a are with the president 100%, and that whatever he says, they will follow. I really needed to ask that because why would a leader find it necessary to pick a microphone? You know, there's normally a joke among the people who do alcohol. that he says ata sijalewa and no one has asked him.
Yeah.
So why was it necessary for him to actually pick up the mic and actually make that statement? He was, of course, trying to either address a notion or a feeling that is somewhere. Two, if there was a whole protocol waiting for the president, as it were, there was all, of course, the argument there by, the explanation by C.S. Macharia was that the president was receiving visitors from Lesotho. Suddenly, you know,
They didn't
and
just arrive
everything
suddenly.
was actually, all systems were in place. One thing, of course, is that the president has got, of course, the monopoly of intelligence.
Yes.
He has done in the past where he's supposed to show up at a meeting
And
and
he
there is for one
diverts.
reason or the other. So there could only be two reasons why the president didn't show up. Either there was going, because already the DP had already cancelled his showing up in Kandara, and he had sent
Senator
Lusaka to actually show up.
Speaker Lusaka.
So it was not a matter of now there being a competition of the two.
Right.
Something outside of that might, and they say Muranga is a small place, but it's actually a place of radicals. Literally, that is the place where Mau Mau were born, way before they moved to Nyeri. So I am feeling the president, there was a feeling, something to eat. Or the second thing would be that probably BBI is just about to come out, and the president didn't want to be in a place where discussions are done that then can actually probably affect or appear to tweak or affect the reporters that will come out. But literally, there is something.
Right.
Yeah, there is fire on the mountain. You cannot run away from that.
So things aren't as usual in
And again, something
in this
happened.
region.
Something happened in Kibra yesterday. The MP from Makadara, Aladwa, said something that should not escape us. We should not wave it with a hand. We should not just... He said that if the president tries to enjoy Raila,
They walk.
they walk.
Yes.
That in itself is a message. And you know how, you know, for us who practice politics like myself and him, we will know exactly when you see a certain person speaks. Even
That's
Chinua
a mouth
Achebe
of
says
Baba.
that even a madman says the right thing at some point.
Right.
Yes.
For somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, of course, we'll wait and see how the political intrigues play out as far as that's concerned. But even as we wind up, one story we need to talk about, and of course this is covered in part in your standard this morning, is this Kenya's greediest banker. Last week, of course, the interest bank cap rates are repealed right there. But Shege Thumbi, who is the banker everybody's talking about, he is the CEO of Sidian Bank right there. And just after they got the news, of course, in terms of the memo, in terms of this particular rate cap being repealed, they have now set their interest rates at 19% moving forward. As you look at this, is this going to be replicated across board? Should we just get ready because he's not the only one who's going to do this? Or do we need government to step in yet again to save us from what they tried to save us from before? Dennis.
I think government was not saving us. I think government was saving themselves.
Yes.
Because technically, if you look at it, and unfortunately, I think the one who furthered the motion, Njomo, MP Njomo, had the best interest at heart. But the biggest gainers, basically, in terms of domestic borrowing, is the government. And the government, interestingly, what they were doing is that they were lending the banks money and borrowing it at a higher rate of 9%. And the domestic borrowing, of course, increased. But the truth of the fact is that if you look at the greatest interest in terms of banking and investors, they're the politicians themselves that own the banks. And I think what it is that I said is that since this is where it is and we can't cap rates, there has to be a way that especially the SME sector is saved from these marauding banks and the dishonesty from the banks. And not just the dishonesty from the banks, the dishonesty from the large corporates who are basically twisting the arms of small businesses. And of course, they said we're not touching the SME factor because their risk in terms of defaulting and increasing our non-performing loans portfolio is large. But there has to be a way that we have to save Kenya from corporate bad manners. Safaricom was taken to court the other day, and now we are seeing the issue with banks. And so there has to be a journey that we have to travel to save the biggest contributor of our GDP from dying and collapsing. And you remember the last time I was here, I asked MP Kioni to please save SMEs. Try and see a way that you can increase and work on the risk portfolio of the SMEs and get a lender who is not interested in making incredible money from these people, who is interested in lifting them so that our GDP can improve. Because ultimately, this is not a conversation of one businessman and one household, even though that is vital. This is a conversation about the wellness, the financial wellness of the country going forward. A country that has overborrowed within the last 7 years and raised the ceiling all the way to 9 billion. Okay. We are discussing about a country that is possibly in the ICU. and which doctor to call forth, so that then we can see a health resurgence of a nation that is collapsing financially.
Nerima, let me bring you into this as well, because this is the first Monday after the repeal cap on this particular one, and already we can see what is happening. How do we bring sanity back to this? The horse has already bolted out of the stable. What do we do as an SME who was probably thinking, now I can get this capital I'm looking for, but clearly it seems the capital will come at a really high price.
It will, and I saw a lot of social media messages going around how the next 3 years will be difficult for Kenyans, and just avoid loans, avoid things that you feel
You cannot.
that you can live without, and just do as minimal as possible. And I believe that we're going to start seeing rates going up really quickly, but then it goes back to my biggest concern: will Kenyans have access to basic needs? If our economy does not improve, as much as our government, for instance, is talking about housing and access to housing with the Big Four agenda, right now people can't even afford a room. You know, people are struggling with rent. Yeah. So even if we're talking about mortgages, we're talking about housing, we're talking about how they're going to be able to pay or make those payments, it's going to be a difficult time. And I believe, of course, banks are going to take advantage of it. It's just a matter of time. They will.
We'd had the bankers talk about this even as the interest rate cap was being debated, that, okay, fine, we made some mistakes prior to the cap. This time round, we'll do better in terms of how we exercise this. This might not probably be what they were talking about. Do you think that we should give them time and that they'll be able to self-regulate as an industry?
Let me tell you, so long as there are no regulations in this particular country, we have greed at the core of our souls as individuals, always looking out for our own interests. I would not be surprised if the members of parliament who pushed the motion were actually interest-driven, in terms of you had a whole interest group backing you up and saying, look, go push for this particular agenda, and we will all benefit at the end of the day. One thing that stands out is that the interests of the Wanjiku have totally been ignored. And for as long as there are no controls in this country, for as long as there are no limits, we will literally exercise the phrase that no human is limited. And banks will go on a frolic of their own, coming up with whatever rates they wish, and they can even go up until 30%, and nobody would care. And this is where now we, especially as young people who are trying to get into business, realizing that the job market does not work for us, have to rethink our ways in which we are doing business. Already, the older generation who have organized themselves and have companies are doing business out of the country. Unfortunately, by the way, we might have to go that direction. In what sense? In the sense that if, for instance, you're in the business of, let's say, agriculture, you're in agriculture and it is not making sales for you in this country, you might have to now start rethinking of how do I, on my own or even in conjunction with my fellow young people, come together and find countries that are in need of our agricultural produce, for instance, neighboring countries that cannot produce agriculturally, and try and have relations with them. It might call upon us as young people planning to get into business to look for investors from other countries. There are countries that have money. For instance, I've been doing a lot of research on the neighboring coastal line countries, for instance, Jubaland, Somaliland, and those areas within the coastal line, countries within the coastal line that either do not have agriculturally viable land and need agricultural produce, and youth should now begin thinking of how do we get into agriculture as a way of making money and transport this produce to countries like Somaliland, Jubaland that need the produce, or also even how do we look for investors outside the country, because a lot of times loans from outside the country tend to have lower interest rates. So no offense, but as a way of just surviving rather than complaining as a youth, we might have to rethink our strategies and think outside the box.
Outside the box.
Yeah.
Arnold, let me bring in on this as well, because we're looking at a situation where already they have seen they can have their way here. If this is a trend we're to see replicated in other banks, how do we get back to the state where essentially we wanted the government to make sure interest is low, we can get this financing and make this happen? That didn't work. You remove the rate cap, now it's too expensive for you to take that same loan. How do we solve this once and for all?
Actually, what the CDN Bank CEO or whatever statement they did and then pulled it back did speaks to one thing, that business is dead.
Yeah.
And therefore, business people are no longer making profit, especially the bigger ones. They are no longer making profit by providing services and goods, but by legislation. So simply by a simple legislation, somebody had already calculated and threw out. So that tells you that business is essentially dead. When corporates, and we're talking about banks, decide now to make profit, not by providing services, but by legislation, that goes back to lobbying. Somebody pushed. And by the time we came up with this law, the interest rate had actually gone to 30%. Right. 29 going to 30. So there was no difference between going to a bank and a Shylock. And about 150 years ago, governments had to rethink the role of a government, not just to keep law and order, but then to also intervene in an economy, answering Adam Smith's oldest question, that should governments intervene in economies? So from where we are today, even as we speak about the ceiling having been put at 9 trillion, I'm actually afraid that probably the government is not looking at that as a ceiling, but as a target. We are already at 6 trillion. They are raising the ceiling, but I'm so sure they actually are convinced they want to buy a legacy by way of bringing in the 3 trillion shillings and buy out. But you cannot solve these problems by throwing money at it.
Let me ask, on that particular issue, when you talk about government intervention in a particular sector,
Yes.
they tried that, they put the rate cap, it didn't work. Now that it's not there, should they let market forces decide, or how do they actually get a solution that works for everybody?
That is what I said last time is called the spiral of misery. That we hope doing that somehow the market forces, we will tumble. It's a pain, a necessary pain that we go through. Then we will stabilize and then grow coming up again. The problem is that it provides an opportunity for political mayhem, and you might not be in control of what happens after that. That is why governments must then intervene in situations like this. Like I'm thinking at this particular time, it would be important that the president thinks of coming up with a stimulus package to just find ways of getting money back into the economy. Even as they try to work around, no, at the moment young people are talking about work. And it's not just young people. Our jobs creation is actually pegged on productivity. Although there is a 20-year, the whole world is actually going through a 20-year gap of productivity going down, even as we prepare for the 4th Industrial Revolution. The thing is that somehow government must find ways of throwing money back into the economy, or rather moving money back into the economy. Number one, by not borrowing locally. So long as they do commercial borrowing, banks will not have business lending to Nthumbi and Ruth and Nerima here. It doesn't make sense. So that they have to stop borrowing locally. They have to find ways of finding money and creating jobs. By the way, to solve this problem, it will just be jobs. Jobs and jobs, nothing else.
Okay, so move around it and look in terms of jobs, but also because of time, we'll have to have our parting shots because clearly there's a lot that we've discussed this morning. So even as we wind up this particular segment, I'd like us to have a parting shot as we get into the week, what you've seen during the weekend, what you're expecting for the week proper. We'll start with Nerima and work our way down the table. What's your parting shot this morning?
My parting shot is actually on Twitter. I've seen jobless economy is trending. There are a lot of young people who are obviously jobless, but the conversations are interesting. For me, my focus is, I have a court case today with the CS Labour.
Yes.
So that's where my mind is.
Right. Okay,
Wish me the best.
All the best in your court
On
case.
behalf of the youth.
What's the
On
case about?
the National Employment Authority.
Please tell the CS to hire you or myself.
No, we need better people. We need people who can manage that
Dennis,
docket.
your parting shot.
Yeah,
this
my
morning.
parting shot is on 2 items. Number one is ODM on Cuba elections must be tamed. DCI and CS must respond, and we must see the rule of law thriving. And again, IBC must address on the issue that voting was depressed, on the fact that there were goons who were riding on the stronghold of Jubilee side. Number three, we must also look at why was there such a huge protest and wide vote. A mere 17 or 16% that ODM got in their bedroom is a signal that speaks loudly. Number two is that our economy is in a stagflation. There's high inflation and there's stagnation. Please, can the government afford access to credit to SMEs? And number two, can the government pay them in a timely manner so that we can see flow of money? And this joblessness, the hopelessness in the economy can be reviewed by just a stimulus package of affording credit to SMEs and making sure that you actually zero rate and share their risk across banks and across yourselves. And banks refused and repressed the access to credit to SMEs when the capping was done. So this is basically a notorious move by the banks, and the government needs to play the big person, not going to bed with a corporate that has gone rogue.
Okay, Ruth, your parting shot this
Well,
morning.
for me, it is no doubt that the young people in this country are extremely talented, very creative, full of ideas and sometimes even platforms to be able to make their lives better. We should not, as a youth, limit ourselves or allow ourselves to be limited to only thinking about what we can do within our country. There are places and countries and nations that would appreciate what we have to offer in terms of skills, in terms of creativity, in terms of even the produce that we come up with. As a nation and as a populace, I would advise the youth to begin thinking critically towards involving themselves in agriculture. Because like it or not, the world will still always be in need of food, will be in need of, there are countries that thrive on importation and exportation of foodstuff to survive. Some of them being our neighboring countries. Right now, if we are not aware, and we need to be aware that there's for instance, there's a Somaliland Investment Forum that is taking place, I think, on the 20th and 21st of this month. That is a great hub and avenue for the youth to go seek investment, to go seek platforms to be able to transport some of the things that they are selling, some of the creative ideas that they do have, even the labor they do have. So we should expand our thinking and, move beyond borders to fight for ourselves, because honestly, no one is fighting for us.
Okay, fine. And lastly, Arnold, what's your parting shot this morning?
My parting shot to the president and the people who are in control, number one, is that work on ensuring that young people get jobs. For the last 7 years, the government has actually forsaken young people. The Ministry of Youth does not work for young people. The Ministry of Labor does not produce, it's actually producing the labor pains and not really labor. We would actually expect that from them. Two, BBI. From where I stand and from where most of us really look at it, we should not be told about what will happen in 2022. This constitution should be implemented. Mr. President, just implement the constitution. We have not implemented it. And finally, I always like to say this, that from where we are, I think Kenyans, we are at one of the best moments we have ever had. And a revolution can actually be happening right under our nose. Sometimes you can actually slip through a revolution. Yeah. For the first time, you realize that there is no difference between the political sides we support. That once they decide to go to bed together, for them, interests matter. And it's also good that we also become interest-based as a people. Where we are today, we are looking at Article 43 only. We only need food, we need education, we need health, we need clean water, and social security, and that is the third and final liberation, in my opinion. Good people, next time you vote, think rationally, note what you do. So for the week, let BBI come. Okay,
fantastic stuff. We'll wait and see if this is the week finally this report will be tabled, because people have waited for it for very, very long. Let's see if this is the week where we finally get it tabled right there. But that's where we draw the curtains as far as our newspaper review is concerned this morning. Aldo Maleba, Ruth Ambogo, Dennis Thumbi, Nerima Wako. Thank you so much for making time this morning. Quite a spirited debate right here. We might have you back on course as well to discuss some more issues right here. We take a short break. Back on the other side as we get interactive. This is K24 This Morning.